The cold found me first. It always does in the Greyfall, that particular northern storm that comes off the Valdenmere peaks in the deep weeks before true winter, carrying ice in its teeth and a darkness that is less like night and more like a decision the sky has made. I had ridden into it on purpose. That was the first of my mistakes. The second was the ditch. My horse shied at something in the black, a branch down across the road, or a sound I didn't hear, and I went sideways into the frozen drainage trench that runs along the Caervon road. I felt the impact before I understood it. Then I felt my side and understood it very well. A stone edge, the wrong angle, something cracked that should not be cracked. I lay in the dark at the bottom of the trench, and the Greyfall came down on top of me, and I thought, with the particular clarity that pain produces, no one knows where you are. That was accurate. I was the Alpha King of Valdenmere, riding alone through a village I had no formal business in, wearing the coat of a wool merchant and the name of no one. I had left my guard at the inn 2 towns east. I had told them I needed to ride the border road and think, which was half true. The other half was a report that had come to me 3 weeks prior, a quiet report, the kind that my counsel preferred I not act on personally, about the pack lords of Caervon collecting tribute from the village healers. Not coin, labor. Forcing the healers to treat pack members for free on demand, while the healers' own households went without. And then, when the healers spoke of it, calling them frauds, stripping their standing. My counsel called it a local matter. I called it the sort of thing a king should see with his own eyes before he decides what it is. So I had ridden out to see it, and now I was in a ditch. I got myself upright by degrees. The ribs were bad but not catastrophic. I had broken ribs before and knew the difference between cracked and separated. Cracked. My left arm was worse. I'd landed on it and something in the forearm had gone wrong, not broken but wrenched hard enough that lifting it sent white through my vision. My horse was gone. The road was gone, under 3 inches of blown snow that had fallen while I was unconscious, which meant I had been in the ditch long enough to accumulate 3 inches of blown snow, which was information I did not enjoy having. I walked. There was a light. I don't know how far. In the Greyfall, distance becomes a negotiation between you and the wind is not interested in your terms. I walked toward the light because it was the only direction available to me, and because the alternative was to remain in the road, and the road in the Greyfall would kill me before morning with perfect indifference. The light was a cottage. It sat at the edge of what I would later learn was called the mire, not a true mire in winter, just the low wet ground on the eastern fringe of Caervon, where the soil was too poor, and the flooding too predictable for anyone to build who had any choice about it. The cottage was small. The thatch was good. There was a lamp in the window and smoke from the chimney, and as I pushed open the low gate with my good arm, the smell of something medicinal and green that cut through the Greyfall like a hand extended. I knocked, or I struck the door with my palm, which was the closest I could manage. She opened it. She was not what I expected, though I could not have told you what I had expected. A woman in plain wool, dark-haired, her sleeves already rolled to the elbow as though she had been working and had simply paused to answer the door. She looked at me the way a person looks at a problem they have already decided to solve, not afraid, not dazzled, not calculating, just assessing. Her eyes went to my arm first, then to my side, then to my face. "Come in," she said. "Mind the step." That was all. No exclamation. "No, what happened to you?" or "Who are you?" She stood aside and I came in out of the Greyfall, and she closed the door behind me, and the warmth of the cottage hit me so hard that my knees very nearly made a decision without consulting me. "Sit," she said, nodding at the bench near the fire. I sat. She brought water and light, a second lamp, held close, and began working without ceremony. Her name, I would learn later, was Sira, daughter of the physician Aldrich, who had served Caervon's pack for 20 years before the pack, Lords decided he had failed a lord's son in a fever case that would have killed the boy regardless of treatment, and stripped him of his standing, and told the village he was a fraud. Aldrich had died 2 winters later, and Sira had stayed in his cottage on the mire and done what she knew how to do, which was heal people. The pack lords sent their servants to her when they had no other option. They did not thank her for it. They did not acknowledge it. She was, in the grammar of Kervan's pack hierarchy, invisible, useful the way a well is useful, something you use without thinking about the labor of it. I did not know any of this yet. All I knew was that her hands were steady. She cut my sleeve to the shoulder to look at the arm, and I let her, and did not wince, and she noticed that I did not wince and said nothing about it. She pressed along the forearm in a sequence that was clearly a method, not a guess, looking for the specific point of failure. "Not broken," she said. "Strained badly, the tendons below the elbow. I'm going to wrap it and you are not going to use it for 4 days. 3, I said. She looked at me. 4. I did not argue further. There was something in the way she said it. Not deference to any authority and not aggression either. Just the plain statement of a person who knows what she knows. She cleaned the arm, wrapped it with cloth strips that smelled of something astringent and pine-edged, and then moved to my side. The ribs required removing my shirt, which I did with her assistance. The arm made it awkward, and she examined the damage with the same method. Pressed. Listened almost to what her hands found. "Cracked," she said. 2, possibly 3. "I'll bind them, it will hurt. I know what bound ribs feel like." She paused, then continued. She asked no questions about how I knew this. The binding took time. She was thorough. While she worked, I looked at the cottage, the shelves of labeled jars, the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the worn but clean workbench, the small hearth with its precise arrangement of pots. The place of someone who had been working in a small space for a long time and had found a logic to it. When she reached for the needle and thread to close a cut I hadn't noticed on my shoulder, a clean one from the stone's edge, I said, without intending to. "You're trained." "My father trained me," she said. She threaded the needle against the lamplight with no visible difficulty. "Hold still." I held still. It was when she drew the thread through the second time that I felt it. I had no word for it immediately. It was warmth, a heat in the wrist of my bound arm, sitting below the wrapping like a coal placed under the skin. Not pain. The opposite of pain. Something arriving or something waking, the way a room you've been in all your life suddenly resolves, and you see where every piece of furniture was always meant to stand. My wolf, who had been silent in me for a decade, since my first mate's death, since the grief that had locked him down so thoroughly that I had half believed he was gone, moved. Not dramatically. He did not howl. He did not surge. He simply opened his eyes the way an old wolf opens his eyes when something enters the room that he has been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. A settling, a recognition behind the ribs. I did not look at my wrist. I did not need to. I knew what a mate mark felt like in its first coming. I had heard it described, had seen it on others, had believed quietly that it was finished for me. A faint dark pattern under the skin of the wrist, like the impression of something botanical, a branching, a spreading. It would deepen over time. It had started. She was still working. She did not see it. My sleeve was cut away and my wrist was wrapped and the mark was under the wrapping and she had not seen it. I made a decision in approximately 4 seconds, which was, I was going to tell her. Not tonight. She had her hands in a wound, and there was a right moment for this kind of information, and this was not it, but I was going to tell her myself, before anyone else could. Before my guard arrived or a lord's servant spotted my horse or word, traveled the way word always travels in small villages when something unusual arrives. She would not find out who I was from someone else. I was decided. "You should sleep," she said, tying off the thread. "I'll put you in the back room. It's small." "It's fine." You haven't seen it yet. Whatever it is, it's inside and out of the Greyfall, which makes it sufficient." She almost smiled, not quite. She cleaned her hands and brought a blanket and showed me to a back room that was indeed very small, a cot, a low shelf, a window that was currently a solid sheet of dark and blown snow. And I lay down, which required a specific sequence of movements to manage the ribs, and I was asleep before I finished working out the sequence. I woke to daylight, which told me I had slept longer than I meant to. She was already working. I could hear her through the wall, the low sounds of the cottage in use, water moving, something being set down with deliberateness. I got myself up, managed the ribs, and came out to find that she had a visitor. A man I did not know, dressed in the layered wool of a middling village tradesman, was sitting at her work table while she examined his hand. He was talking steadily, a low, aggrieved murmur about a neighboring property dispute. She was listening, or appeared to be. Her attention was on his hand, which had a cut across the palm that was infected, red-tracked and swollen. She cleaned it, drained it, packed it with something that smelled of honey and clove, and bandaged it, and the man stood and said, "Lord Parrott's man will be by Thursday for the healer's tithe." She did not look up from her workbench. "Tell him I'll have the supply packet ready." The man left. She had not charged him anything. He had not offered. I sat at the bench near the fire, because sitting was what I could do, and because I was not leaving in the Greyfall regardless of my preferences, and I watched. The morning brought 3 more visitors. A child with a fever, she assessed, prescribed a specific boiling of 2 herbs she measured from the labeled jars, and sent the mother home with instructions so clear they required no repeat. A woman with a burn on her forearm, treated bound. A small pot of salve pressed into her hands with directions for changing the dressing. An elderly man with a chest complaint who she listened to for a long time, her ear against his back, before prescribing a steam treatment and rest, and a second visit in 4 days. None of them paid her, not in coin. The woman with the burn left a small wrapped piece of bread on the table as she went. I noted it, and Sira thanked her without making it larger than it was. The pack lord's man came in the late morning. He was not Lord Parrott's man, but someone from the household of Lord Davin, one of the 3 lords who administered Caervan under my counsel's broader oversight. He came in without knocking and told Sira that Lord Davin's second son had a throat complaint, and she was to come to the hall by afternoon. She said she had a patient returning at midday. He said she could rearrange it. She looked at him steadily for a moment. Then, "I'll come at the 3rd hour, not before." He left, dissatisfied, and did not close the door fully behind him. She closed it. She turned back to her work and caught me watching her and said, with perfect equanimity, "The Greyfall usually lets up by tomorrow. You should be able to ride if you take it slowly." "I have no horse." "I know. I sent the Hartley boy to look for it this morning. He may have found it." She was already moving toward her workbench. "Eat something. There's bread in the pot on the left." I ate. She worked. The snow came down outside in a way that suggested tomorrow's prediction was optimistic. By the 2nd day, I had stopped pretending. I was going to leave shortly. The Greyfall had settled into the patient, methodical kind of storm, not violent but complete, filling every gap, sealing the roads, making the Meyer cottage the total world available to us. The Hartley boy had not found my horse. My ribs remained precisely as cracked as they had been, the arm precisely as wrapped, and Sira showed no particular distress about any of it. She gave me tasks I could do one-handed, sorting dried herb bundles, refilling the lamp reservoirs, holding things steady while she worked. And if she found it strange that a man in a merchant's coat sorted medicinal herbs with the focused quiet of someone who had held still through difficult things before, she did not remark on it. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, while she was making a preparation at the workbench and I was doing something approximately useful nearby, she said, without preamble, The lords here take the healer's tithe in supply and in labor. It was my father's arrangement after his standing was stripped. He kept it so they'd have reason to leave us in peace. She was not looking at me. She was measuring something into a small pot. And you've continued it, I said. I've continued it. She was quiet for a moment. They use it as license to call me whenever they like. I have a village to tend. Sometimes there's a conflict. She set down the measure. I've written to the council in Ashgar 3 times. Something moved in my chest. What response did you get? A form letter the first time. Nothing the second. The third, I was told it was a local matter. My counsel, my letters, my form responses, which bore my seal and were written by my administrative staff without my reading them. A local matter. I looked at the window, at the gray press of the Greyfall, and held this thought the way you hold something you need to examine carefully before you speak about it. That's insufficient, I said. She glanced at me. Her expression was briefly unguarded, surprised, I thought, to hear the word from a wool merchant in a worn coat. Yes, she said, it is. She returned to her work. I've stopped expecting better. I do what I do and the village is healthier for it, and that's what I have. It's not enough, I said, for what you provide. She was quiet again, not disagreeing, just taking it in. What's your name? She asked after a moment. It was the first time she had asked in 2 days of tending me and feeding me and assigning me tasks. Calder, I said, which was true. Sira, she said, which I knew. The mark on my wrist had been deepening since the first night. I could feel it under the wrapping, the faint warmth, constant now like a held ember. My wolf moved at intervals, restless in the best sense of the word. Attentive. He watched her the way he watched nothing else, and he had been a wolf who watched nothing for 10 years. I thought about my first mate often in the years since her death, about how it had felt, the first bond, instant and enormous, a door blown open. I had grieved when it closed. I had believed it would never come again, and I had made a kind of peace with that, because a king can find uses for a life without a mate if he has to, and I had had to. This was nothing like that. This did not blow open. It was more like a thaw. The specific, patient process where warmth does not arrive all at once, but works its way inward by degrees, finding the ice in the grain of the wood. And the ice releases without drama, because the warmth has been present long enough that release is simply what comes next. She set a bowl in front of me that evening with the same quiet efficiency she set everything down. And we ate in the kind of silence that had stopped being uncomfortable somewhere around noon on the first day, and outside the Greyfall continued its argument with the world. On the morning of the third day, she found the mark. I had washed, managing it carefully with one arm, and was rewrapping the forearm myself badly, when she came in and looked at what I was doing and said, with the professional briskness that characterized everything she said, "Let me," and took the cloth from me and began rewrapping and saw it. She was still for one breath. Her hands did not leave my wrist. She looked at the pattern, the branching dark lines under the skin, unmistakable to anyone who lived in a pack world, which she did. "That's a mate mark," she said. "Yes." "It's recent." "Yes." She looked up at me. Her expression was a careful, controlled thing, someone who has learned not to let the face run ahead of the mind. She was thinking. I could see it. "That appeared here," she said. "In the last 2 days." "The first night," I said, "when you closed the shoulder." She was quiet for a moment. Her hands, still holding my wrist, were very still. "Do you know what that means?" she said. It was not quite a question. "I know exactly what it means." "And you didn't say anything." "I wanted you to know it under the right conditions, not while your hands were in a wound." Something moved in her face, not softness exactly, but the thing that lives adjacent to it. She looked down at the mark again. Her thumb moved briefly across the pattern, and the ember in my wrist flared quietly in response, and I kept my face composed. I said, have something else to tell you. She looked at me. My name is Calder, that's true. My full name is Calder Ashkar. I am the Alpha King of Valdenmere. The silence that followed was the longest silence of the previous 3 days, which had contained several long silences. You rode into Caervan alone, she said finally. Yes. In the Greyfall. The timing was inadvertent. To look at what the Pack Lords were doing. Yes. She looked at the mark, then at me. Then she set down my wrist with the wrap finished neat, properly done, and stood, and went to the window and looked at the Greyfall, which was beginning for the first time to show signs of letting up. The letters, she said. I did not read them, my staff did, I am addressing that. Now. Starting now, yes. She was quiet for another moment. Outside, the snow had thinned enough to see the outline of the nearest tree. You should have told me. I should have. I didn't want it to change how you worked, or how you spoke to me. She turned from the window. How I spoke to you. You told me 4 days, not 3. You needed 4 days. I know that's what I mean. She studied me for a moment with that assessing look, the one she had given me on the first night, the problem she had decided to solve. Then she said, very evenly, I don't know what you're expecting to happen now. I'm not expecting anything. I'm asking when the time is right to have a conversation. You have the mark too. I said it gently. On your left hand, inside the wrist. It's been there since the first morning. She looked down. She had not noticed it, or had noticed it and not looked closely, or had looked and not known what she was seeing. Now she looked. The same pattern, the same branching, the twin of mine. She was very still for a long moment. The storm is breaking, she said. Yes. Your guard will come. They'll know to find me here, or near here. The Hartley boy will have told someone. She nodded once. She did not say anything more, and I did not push her, because she had just received significant information and she was the kind of person who needed to hold it quietly before she knew what to do with it, and I recognized that, and had no intention of pressuring her in any direction. The bond was real. The mark was on both our wrists. The rest was hers to decide. They came before noon. 4 of my personal guard on horseback, with the Hartley boy riding on the back of the last horse looking deeply important. They came through the gate of the Meyer cottage and into the small yard, and Sira opened the door and stood in the frame, and I came out behind her. Lord Davin's man was with them. That I had not anticipated. They must have passed through the village and been collected, or the guard's inquiry had brought him out. He was a man in his late middle years, well-fed and cold-eyed, and he looked at the scene in the yard with the careful calculation of a man who smells political consequence and is trying to determine which direction it's moving. My guard dismounted. The senior man, Aldrich, no relation to her father, a coincidence I noted, said, with the particular neutrality of a guard who has been professionally worried for 3 days, "My Lord King, we've been searching." "I'm well," I said. "A fall in the Greyfall. The healer here tended me." Lord Davin's man stepped forward. He looked at Sira the way people look at furniture that is in the wrong place and needs to be moved. "The Meyer woman," he said, "not to her, about her, to the yard generally. You'll want to know, my lord, that this woman has been in violation of the healer's tithe twice this." "Stop," I said. He stopped. The yard was very quiet. The last of the Greyfall was moving off to the east, leaving a cold, bright morning, the snow on the Meyer brilliant and undisturbed. I said, "This woman is Sira, daughter of the physician Aldrich of Caervan, trained healer and the most skilled practitioner in 3 counties by my direct observation. She tended an unknown traveler in a snowstorm for 3 days with what I believe was the same quality of attention and care she extends to everyone she treats, which I also observed directly." I let a brief pause settle. "She is also, as of this morning, under my personal protection as the Alpha King of Valdenmere." Her standing in this pack, and in this county, is to be considered equal to any trained healer certified by the Crown. Any lord who has levied tribute against her or interfered with her practice will present their accounts to my administrative council by the end of the month. I looked at Lord Davin's man, who had the expression of a man watching the floor discover it is a trapdoor. Speak to her the way you just spoke to her again, in my presence or out of it, and we will have a different conversation. He said nothing. I turned to Sira. She was looking at me. Her expression had the same careful control it always had, but underneath it, in the set of her mouth, in the slight parting of it, was something that was working its way toward the surface. I have a question, I said, and my voice came out quieter because this was not for the yard. And it is a question, not a command or a claiming. You are free to answer it however you choose. I paused. I would like you to come to Ashgar Hold to see it, to speak with me further in better conditions than a cottage in a storm about what is here between us and what you'd like to do about it. If the answer is nothing, if you would rather stay and keep this practice and treat me as a recovered stranger who has gone back to his kingdom, I will honor that. I will still correct the injustice here. That's not contingent. She was quiet. But if you're willing, I said, I would be glad of your company. Outside, the last cloud of the grayfall moved off the sun, and the light came down on the Meyer cottage, and the small yard, and the gate she had opened on the first night. And on her, in her plain wool with her sleeves already rolled to the elbow because she had been working when they arrived. She looked at the mark on her wrist, then at me. I have a patient at midday, she said. Then we'll leave after midday. The corner of her mouth moved, just barely. You could have said noon. I could have, but you'd tell me to say midday. She turned and went back into the cottage. After a moment I followed her, leaving my guard in the yard with the morning light and Lord Davin's very quiet man. And inside the cottage was warm and smelled of pine and clove, and the specific green scent that had reached me through the grayfall on the worst night of the year. And I stood in it, and understood, in the way that requires no announcement, that I had come in out of the cold. It is the better part of a year since the grayfall. Ashgar Hold has changed less than you'd think, for all that it has a new presence at its center. Sira moves through it the way she moved through the Meyer cottage, with the particular purposefulness of someone who has a great deal to do and has found the logic of the space. The physic rooms on the Hold's lower east wing were empty when she arrived. They are not empty now. The Hold's wolves, who are accustomed to the attentions of the castle staff, have developed a specific preference for her rounds, which she conducts each morning and which I have entirely stopped trying to interrupt, because it is clear this is not something she is willing to give up, and I would not take it from her if I could. There is a stray pup, a young gray male no pack wanted, who arrived in the yard 3 months ago and has made himself at home with a completeness that I recognize, because I have done the same thing. I stopped trying to formalize the arrangement sometime in the spring. The mark is there. It deepens when we are in the same room. My wolf, awake now in a way I had forgotten was possible, requires no further ceremony. Sira, for her part, has made her position clear in ways that do not involve ceremony either. She simply occupies the space she occupies, with the same calm authority she used to tell me 4 days and not 3. There is a thing she does, in the evening when the work is done. She asks me what I looked at that day, not what I decided, not what was difficult, what I looked at. And I tell her, the reports, the window, the yard in morning light, the faces of the lords when they realize their accounts are being reviewed. And she listens the way she listened to the old man's chest, attending, looking for the specific point of failure or the thing that is holding. And I ask her the same, because she is a person who looks at things, and what she sees is worth knowing. Last night she told me about the light on the Meyer in winter, and how she used to watch it from the cottage window in the early dark and think it was the loneliest light she had ever seen. And she said, I don't think that anymore. I do not think it either.